Alright guys, so far we've talked about putting lines into slope-intercept form and in point-slope form. Today we're going to talk about writing linear equations in standard form. Now if you recall, standard form is ax plus by equals c. Now that doesn't seem too difficult, but there are a couple of checks that you have to look for. There's certain things that make this standard form. So the first thing that makes it standard form is that the x and the y are on the same side and the constant's on the other. So that's our first check. X and y terms are on the same side. Okay, so if x and y are on the same side, it is not in standard form. If it doesn't equal a constant, whether it's 0, 1, -5, then it's not in standard form. All right, the second check is that a is positive. So when I'm saying a, I'm talking about the coefficient of x. Whatever's in front of x needs to be a positive number. And then finally, a, b, and c, those are going to be numbers in a problem. Those are all going to be integers. So all numbers are integers. So what this means is there are no fractions and no decimals in this form. Okay, so standard form for us is going to be ax plus by equals c, where all the numbers are integers, a is positive, and ax and by are on the same side. So let's look at converting. Today that's all we're going to do is we're going to convert equations into standard form. So the first one we're going to look at is y equals -3x plus 4. So to get this into standard form, we need to move this x to the other side. In order to move it to the other side, we're going to use our inverse operations. So I have to add 3x to both sides. When I do that, this one goes away, and I'm left with positive 3x, and this is understood to be positive as well. So plus y equals 4. Then you do your checks. Okay, are x and y on the same side? Yes. Is the a, this 3 right here, is it positive? Yes. Is the numbers, are they integers? Well, that's a 3, that's an understood 1, and that's a 4. All three of those are integers, so this is standard form and we are done. 3x plus y equals 4, standard form. All right, let's look at number 2. Y equals 2x minus 1. Excuse me. Again, this is currently in slope-intercept form, so we are going to subtract the x term over. So that's negative 2x plus y equals -1. And yes, it does matter. X needs to come before y. That's the form. So the problem with this one is that there's this negative in front of the 2x. Okay, these are all integers, which is good. The problem is the negative in front of the x. So to get rid of that negative, all we're going to do is multiply everything by a -1. That's what we want to get rid of is a negative, so multiply it by negative. So this is going to be times -1 times -1 times -1. Every single term has to be multiplied by -1. And when we multiply them, that becomes a positive 2x, that becomes a negative y, and that becomes a positive 1. Now, it doesn't matter that y is negative. That's an okay thing. It's just the a. Ax cannot be negative. Now we're in standard form. We're done. Okay? All right, number 3. Y equals -1/2 x plus 3. All right, we're going to throw some fractions into the mix. Same steps. This is slope-intercept form, so I need to take the x term over with the y. To do that, I'm going to use inverse operations. Add 1/2 x to both sides. That gives me a positive 1/2 x plus y equals 3. Now, x and y are on the same side. What's the problem with this solution? the fraction right here. This 1/2 is the issue. Okay. Now, if it was just 1x, that'd be okay. The problem is that there's a denominator of 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and multiply every single term by this denominator of 2. So we're going to do times 2, times 2, times 2, just like we cleared fractions in the past. So when I multiply everything by 2, 1/2 times 2 is 1x, or just x. Y times 2 is positive 2y. And 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, then we check again. Are they integers? Yes. Is x positive? Yes. We are done. Okay. Number 4. Y equals 4/3 x minus 1. Let's put it all together now. So, we're going to subtract the 4/3 x to both sides. And that leaves us with negative 4/3 x plus y equals negative 1. Now, there are two issues with this problem. Okay, x is negative. That's not good. And there's a denominator of 3. Again, not good. We need those two things removed. So we are going to take and multiply by what we need to get removed. We're going to multiply by negative 3. We're going to do it in one step. So by multiplying by the negative, it clears the negative there. And by multiplying by the 3, it clears the 3. So that leaves us with negative 4/3 times negative 3 is positive 4x. Y times negative 3 is negative 3y. And negative 1, times negative 3 is positive 3. Okay, notice, no fractions. A is now positive. That is standard form. And we're done. Okay? All right, I want you to try number 5. So I'm going to write it up here. Once I write it up here, pause the video, try to solve it on your own, and then when you're ready, turn the video back on. So your problem is going to be y equals 7/2 x minus 3. So pause the video now. All right, hopefully you're ready to see your answer for number 5. So you should have gotten 7x minus 2y equals 6. Okay, you would have subtracted the 7/2 over, and because there is a negative on the x and a 2 in the denominator, we need to get rid of both of those things by multiplying by negative 2. So you would have gotten 7x minus 2y equals 6. Okay? All right, let's look at another equation. So this is another one we're familiar with. Y minus 2 equals 1/2 times x minus 4. All right, this is point slope form. Well, we need to get it into standard. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this equation down into slope-intercept form because we're familiar with doing that. So to do that, we're going to first distribute. So 1/2 times x is 1/2 x, and 1/2 times negative 4 is negative 2. Please be careful of your signs. Then we're going to take and add 2 to both sides. So that gives us y equals 1/2 x. Now 2 minus 2 is 0. So we just have y equals 1/2 x. But we need to get this into standard form. So that means we have to subtract the 1/2 x. Now sometimes when students do this, they get a little concerned because they're not really sure what to write. They'll put negative 1/2 x plus y, and then they have no idea what it equals. Well, what's left on this side? That just adds up to be 0. So write 0. Negative 1/2 x plus y equals 0. Now, the issue again is that we have a denominator right there, and we have a negative on the x. So we're going to multiply everything, including the 0, by negative 2. So when we do that, this becomes positive 1x, negative 1/2 times negative 2, minus 2y equals negative 2. Now, is that right? No, remember, this is multiplying. So 0 times negative 2 should not be negative 2. I have students do that all the time. You need to make sure and put 0 times negative 2 is 0. Okay, so x minus 2y equals 0 is our final answer. A is positive, and those are integers, even 0. 0 is an integer. Standard form. Okay, so number 7. I want you to try number 7. So y plus 3 equals 6 times x minus 1. So pause the video. When you're ready, turn it back on. All right, hopefully you're ready to see your answer. So you should have gotten 6x minus y equals 9. I have a feeling some of you may have stopped at this part up here. Remember, x cannot be negative. So the first thing you do is you distribute 6x minus 6, then subtract 3. There's our slope-intercept form. Subtract 6 from both sides, and then multiply by -1. So I hope you got that one correct. If not, make sure you fix it. All right, let's look at one that's not in point-slope form. So this is just going to be kind of a crazy equation. It's not really going to be any form. So 3/2 x minus 1/2 y minus 3 equals 0. This isn't point-slope, this isn't slope-intercept, this isn't standard. But we want to get it into standard. So the first thing we need to do is get the x and y by itself. So to do that, we're going to add 3 to both sides. Because right now, the x and y are on the same side together, which is good. We just need to move the constant. So 3/2 x minus 1/2 y equals positive 3. Now, the x is positive, but notice here we have two fractions. We have a fraction on the x and we have a fraction on the y. It's just like clearing fractions like we've done in the past. They have the same common denominator too, so we're going to take and multiply by 2. So when we do that, we're left with 3x minus y equals 6. Don't forget to multiply the constant. Okay? Now we're in standard form, and we're done. Okay? Integer coefficients, 3 is positive. So let's try number 9. 3 minus y equals 0. All right, well now this one doesn't have an x. Well, that's okay. You can have a 0 coefficient on an x or a y. We just need to solve this for y in this case because the y is by itself. So we would subtract 3 from both sides. Negative y equals -3. Divide or multiply. Either way, we can't have, it's the same concept. You can't have the y be negative in this case. If there's only one x or there's only one y, they cannot be negative. So we could either divide by -1 or we could multiply by -1. And that's going to give us y equals positive 3. So that's standard form. Okay, conversely, if this had been an x, let's say this had been x minus 7 equals 2. Okay, no y's in this one. We would just add 7. So x equals 9. That is in standard form because the x is positive. Now there could be a number in front. Let's say this had been 2x. Okay, we could have 2x equals 9. That's standard form. Okay, it's just that they have to be positive. This has to be positive, this has to be positive. Most of the time, however, you're not going to see a number in front. Okay, that 2 usually isn't there because we can easily graph this. All right, last one, number 10. This is going to be a little crazy. So 3y equals 1/2 x minus 2/3 plus y. All right, a little crazy. So we have to get the x's and the y's on the same side. Now this time we have a couple of y's. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get those y's together. So that's going to give me 2y equals 1/2 x minus 2/3. Okay, that's gone now. Then get the x on the same side. So subtract it over. That's negative 1/2 x plus 2y equals negative 2/3. Now, couple issues again. X is negative. And notice we don't just have one fraction, we have two. The constant can't be a fraction either. And this time they're not the same number. Up here they were the same number and we could just multiply by 2. So if they're not the same number, you have to find the least common denominator. So for 2 and 3, those numbers both divide evenly into 6. And remember, if you're not sure what numbers they go into, all you have to do is start counting. So if you do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on, then do it with 3. 3, 6, 9, 12, and so on. Notice 6 is the smallest number they both have in common. So we're going to take and multiply everything by -6. Okay, and when we do that, negative 1/2 times negative 6 this time is 3x. 2y times negative 6 is negative 12y. And negative 2/3 times negative 6 is positive 4. Okay, so x is positive. All of those are integers. That's the answer. That is standard form. Okay, now on the back of this notes, you're going to find your homework. You need to work those problems. You need to show work. Make sure they're in standard form. No decimals, no fractions, and the x term has to be positive. Okay?